Hi there, guys, and welcome to this week's edition of the Weiss Crypto Sunday Special. With me, your host, Chris Coney. Guest analyst today, it's Juan. Juan, welcome back to the Sunday Special once again, sir.
Good to be here, Chris.
Excellent to have you, mate. So today we're going to do a follow-up on the very first episode of the Weiss Crypto Sunday Special. In the first episode, we discussed Layer 2 scaling of blockchains and some of the concepts we spoke about back then. In the episode, they're only revisiting, redefining, nuancifying, if that's even a word. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay, great. So let's get down to it. So you and I think we're pretty much in consensus about this, pardon the pun, but our current favorite scaling solution is Polygon, right? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay, good. And why do we love Polygon as investors and traders?
As investors, it's quite easy. You can invest in this layer 2.
Whereas invest in it itself, can't you?
You can buy it. I think I made that point last time. We made the same point that hey, you can invest into this thing. So you don't normally get to invest. It's like buying Lightning network on Bitcoin, for example.
Right, exactly.
Which you can't. I mean, exactly. Just buy Bitcoin. And since we made the first video, Arbitrum has launched. That's an optimistic rollup solution. I believe that optimism is just around the corner. You can fact check me on that. I don't know if it's fully launched yet, but it will come soon.
Do you see? I posted in the group today that Uniswap now allows you to switch to optimism version of it.
I noticed, and I'm basing my comment off of that. It's like, okay, so I guess it's around then. I haven't heard a lot of buzz about it around it yet, so I'm guessing it hasn't fully launched yet, but Arbitrum has. And so we can compare the two better. And like you said, last debate was not, I don't think we were nuanced enough, because I came away with the impression after listening to it that I thought we gave the too strong an impression that Polygon is simply superior on all levels, period, and there's nothing to these optimistic rollup solutions. When I say optimistic rollup, by the way, I want to distinguish that bit. I want to distinguish between optimistic rollups and Optimism, the network.
Right.
They use the same technology, but Arbitrum is another.
They call it solution. Optimistic Ethereum. That's what they've started referring to themselves as, optimistic Ethereum.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's funny. Anyway,
it's like
so
Ethereum
you have the
classic.
Yeah.
That's not going there,
so you do not get to invest in those. When Arbitrum went live, I actually have some Ethereum on Arbitrum. I tried it out. I tried out the fees. I tried out the speed of transactions. Just tried out some stuff. Pretty cool. It uses Ethereum. So you don't get to invest in it. There's no Matic equivalent. Matic being the token. Right. You can buy Ethereum for sure.
But that means Arbitrum's adding value to the ETH token as well.
It does. Certainly, and that's a very good point. It does add value to the Ethereum token itself. You buy Ethereum, but it's not a pure play on layer 2. You could argue Polygon is a pure play on layer 2, so that's one advantage. I guess the main distinction between the two is trust required to operate in these two environments. When you're on Polygon, you're basically on a separate blockchain. And the issue with being on a separate blockchain is you're implicitly trusting an entirely new set of validators. You're not trusting the Ethereum miners with your money or with your funds. You're trusting the Polygon validators. Now, since Polygon is more than a sidechain, it's what they call a commit chain, there's some advantages to operating on Polygon versus something like an Ethereum copycat, like Binance Smart Chain, which lives in its entirely own separate universe. The Polygon network is a bit different. The validator set lives on Ethereum. So these are registered on a smart contract on Ethereum. If you want to stake your Matic, you have to be on layer 1.
So Ethereum mainnet knows about these validators, right?
Yeah, the Ethereum mainnet is where these validators are quote unquote registered.
Sure.
So there's that. There's also the fact that once every hour or so, these validators will write a summary of whatever has been happening on Polygon. A summary of the Polygon blockchain is written into Ethereum. That's why it's called a commit chain, I believe, because they're committing. These people are saying, hey, this is what's happened on our network. We're committing to this. We're all signing on to this. We're signing off on this. We're saying this is what happened. So you don't have to fully trust us, guys, because you can always call us out. If we do something, if we cheat in some way, it is possible for someone to look at the Ethereum blockchain and say, hey, these validators are lying. they're not telling the truth. Now, does that prevent the validators from lying? No, not really. They can still cheat. This validator
once
set,
you commit, you're committing, and that's it, right?
you're committing, and that's it. It doesn't mean you have to follow this. So there's more trust on the Polygon Ethereum model than there is in optimism, because optimism is totally different.
But on Polygon, right, that means that you're only having to pay the mainnet Ethereum transaction fee once per hour instead of for every single transaction if you were doing it on the base layer.
Right.
It's like
that's correct.
Like leapfrogging all that traffic, you know, by taking a bypass on Polygon.
Yeah. All of these layer twos, and if we call Polygon a layer two, the advantage is you're batching transactions. So every time on Polygon, these validators are writing a summary, a settlement. Right. They settle on Ethereum. They're batching a whole bunch of transactions. Same thing on Arbitrum.
So it's not like we as individual users have to do that at all. Not like once every hour. No. It's not we don't have to do that.
No.
Right.
No. It's the network itself. It's part of their normal operations. By the way, every time.
Care of, right?
Yes, and every time they commit, you also get to release your funds from. If you want to go from Polygon to mainnet, I mean, there's many ways to do it now, but one of the ways to do it is using the validators themselves.
For that commit, and then
wait for that commit, and then your funds get released.
Gotcha.
So that's pretty cool. Now, I believe that Arbitrum, that the main selling point for Arbitrum, in my opinion, is that it's far more trustless.
Okay.
Because not only do they commit far more often, I think it's every 6 minutes, but every 6 minutes, boom, they are committing to the Ethereum mainnet, and even though this is the same commit that the Polygon validators are committing to, in other words, just because they're writing a commit, it doesn't mean they're not lying. But on top of that, on Arbitrum, it kind of works like a blockchain, but it's not, because there's a trace of every transaction that has taken place on the Polygon, on the Arbitrum network, on the Arbitrum layer, and even though it is not completely trustless, because I don't know if I should touch on secret rollups now, but basically there's two types of rollups. There's one type where every time they commit to the mainnet, you already know they're telling the truth. This is not that. Optimism is not that. Just because they're committing, it doesn't mean they're not lying. However, it is possible for anyone who's looking at the Arbitrum network to validate everything that's going on, that has happened up until a certain point, and it is possible for anybody, any individual, to verify the whole chain. So it is possible for any actor to verify the whole Arbitrum chain and know whether or not there has been a conflict or someone has cheated. In other words, you're not really trusting a set of validators. You're not trusting anybody. Because
you can validate it inside the Arbitrum network itself.
Exactly.
You don't have to wait for the...
Correct. So anyone looking at the Arbitrum network can say, okay, this is the correct path. We speak of paths in the Arbitrum network because there can be several forks. In other words, different versions of what's happened, but only one is true. And it's possible for anybody to come in and verify the chain and know which one is the correct path. In other words,
citizen policing.
Yeah, exactly. And the advantage of having any individual being able to verify the whole chain is that you're not actually trusting anybody. This thing, and this is the point that the Arbitrum developers made, this is trustless because any individual can come in and verify the whole chain. If there's several conflicting versions of this chain, it is possible for anybody to know which is the correct one. And once they know which the correct one is, they can act as a bridge, for example. Why would they act as a bridge? The reason they would act as a bridge is because if you want to release your funds from Arbitrum to mainnet, you have to wait 7 days. On paper, that sounds horrible. Yeah, that's horrible. You have to wait 7 days. That's why I'm personally not really using Arbitrum right now, because I move funds back and forth all the time. And I'm not going to wait 7 days. Even waiting an hour is sometimes a long time for me. So 7 days, just a no-go. It's a deal breaker. I'm not going to use Arbitrum until this issue is solved. But it can be solved.
Why is it a deal breaker for you?
Because I do a lot of arbitrage.
Arbitrage.
The crypto markets move fast. When I need funds moved, yeah, I can wait an hour or two. But ideally, I would have the funds moved in about 10 minutes. 5 instant if possible.
Well, specifically because arbitrage is a temporary price discrepancy.
That is correct.
Which would vanish at any minute, so you can't mess about, right?
Yeah, you can have funds on both places where you're doing the arbitrage, but sometimes funds must be moved because you have to collateralize positions. Sometimes you have an under collateralized positions here and then an over collateralized position there, and so you want to move funds, let's say, from layer 2 on the OIDX to whatever, some exchange or some or Polygon, let's just say, because Polygon is now under collateralized, whatever, and that doesn't take too long. But on Arbitrum, right now, it takes 7 days. That's a deal breaker. It can be a deal breaker for many other reasons. Sure. I don't think the developers emphasize it enough because I suppose that for most use cases, you wouldn't really care. But I would still hold that waiting 7 days to have your funds released is a problem. Now, there's a solution. Because it is possible for any individual to verify the entire chain, it is possible for them to act as a bridge. If I have funds on Arbitrum and I have funds on Ethereum mainnet, then I can take that 7-day risk that it takes to actually settle transactions. I can take that risk off of you. And if you want to have your funds on mainnet, you send your funds to me, I release funds to you on mainnet, and we're done. It takes 5 minutes. So we're back to it takes almost no time at all. And now, why is this possible? Again, it is possible because if I am doing this bridging, I can verify the whole Arbitrum chain. I can know what the true path is. I can know what the truth is. And I know it's not possible for anyone to cheat and for anyone to lie. That is not true on Polygon. I know that this is nuanced, but in Polygon, it is technically possible for these validators here on the separate blockchain to lie completely. And it's extremely hard to challenge them. Actually, there is no way to challenge them, as far as I'm aware.
Unless you are a validator yourself.
Exactly. The community could come in. I mean, there's the meta, what I call the meta of crypto, where if suddenly Polygon went rogue, everybody would know about it. The blockchain will be forked. Trust will be lost. These validators will be kicked out. Yes.
Destroy their own ecosystem.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, we just fork to the last known true state, and that's done. But there's no mechanism to challenge cheaters on Polygon. They have their own mechanisms, obviously. The entire chain would have to go rogue. This is not some people on Polygon are trying to cheat. This is the whole thing becomes corrupt. Again, not a lot of risk there, but Arbitrum is arguably better. I'm using Arbitrum as an example, but Optimism is the same. Sure. It's arguably better. There's a challenge period. So if I know what the truth is, I know that through the challenge period, within 7 days, the truth will be found. And if I know that within 7 days the truth will absolutely be found, then I can just sit here as a bridge and say, I'll charge you a fee to wait for those 7 days. I'll release the funds to you immediately. So this is
a service someone in the free market can create and say, I'll sell you the convenience.
And they will. They will do this. It's already in the works, which is why I think if it's on Arbitrum, there's like a disclaimer that says, hey, this is early days. You have to wait 7 days to withdraw your funds. The reason they say, hey, this is early days, because no one has stepped forward yet to provide the service, but they will. So from a user perspective, this will be it will be probably easier to unlock funds from Arbitrum into mainnet. And the reason for that is, it is far more trustless to use Arbitrum, to use a roll-up solution than a sidechain. There's a lot less trust involved. You are really inheriting the security of the mainnet, and that's a huge advantage, in my opinion, that roll-ups have over the likes of Polygon.
Sure. It's like the distance you go, I made this point earlier on, it's the distance you go away from the base layer, in my mind anyway. It's cyberspace, so there's no distance, but it's just a logical model. So base layer, and then you go a certain distance away from that with layer 2 in terms of the closeness or the trust. The trust of the base layer is slightly surrendered. And then when you go further to Polygon, it's more surrendered. Then Binance Smart Chain is over here, along in a universe unto itself, as it were. And it's its own ecosystem that doesn't really share data or commit to the Ethereum chain in any way. So,
yeah,
but little say.
Yeah, little side note there. I do believe that the likes of Binance Smart Chain will eventually be confronted with the, how do I say this? They'll be confronted with the reality that unless they commit to a secure blockchain, then there's no room for them to exist. So I do believe there's hope for these semi-centralized Ethereum alternatives if they commit to Ethereum. If they say, "Hey, we're gonna do it the way Polygon did it. We're just gonna commit to Ethereum," and that will add a layer of trust, because at least these people do not intend on cheating, which is not something today with these alternative, smaller market cap or more obscure, opaque kind of blockchains, quote unquote. I don't like those at all. I think for me personally, the reason I wanted to get back to the subject is because trust is very important in crypto. Trust and trustlessness are the bedrocks of crypto. This is what made it possible. Bitcoin is possible because it's trustless. No trust required. If trust had been required to bootstrap something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, they never would have taken off. So you always need this robust, secure, trustless settlement layer. And then you can build all these solutions on top that require a bit more trust. But as long as you can settle, and as long as you have some guarantee that this trustless layer still acts as a guarantor for all these things that are going on these alternative networks, then you're fine. Then that's a good compromise to make. You're getting more speed, you're getting cheaper transactions, and you're not giving up this trustless property.
So what we're asking there is for the networks to anchor themselves in something objective. So
yes.
So if Ethereum is the ultimate arbiter of truth, because it's the base layer, and especially since at least right now it's based on proof of work, it anchors it in the physical objective world. And then you're saying you can build any number of subjective worlds on top of that. Like at the minute, this is the problem with Binance Smart Chain. It's this it's all relative realm, which isn't actually anchored to reality. And you're saying eventually that just trust us, it's fine, kind of relative reality is going to be like, that's not good enough given the certainty that Bitcoin and Ethereum can offer.
Totally. I mean, you're really trusting them as opposed to, and do you really trust them? Do you know how it works? Again, these may seem like theoretical issues until they're not. Because if someone, some rogue agent, some government, something came along and decided to attack some of these networks, the minute trust is required on a single counterparty, that's a single point of failure. You can attack that and bring the whole thing crashing down. And so the reason you want to have a secure, robust, trustless layer is because you want that guarantee that that's not going to happen. And so this is why I've said before, for example, again, slight detour, but anyone that figures out how to use Bitcoin as a settlement layer really has a head start here, because this is the most secure of all blockchain decentralized open networks. Well, it's Bitcoin, not Ethereum, right?
So because in Bitcoin transactions you have that op return field, which is just where you can include an arbitrary string in there, which could be a hash from anywhere. You could hash Ethereum. You could commit Ethereum to Bitcoin every hour if you wanted to.
I'd love that.
Well, we might have to do that when we go proof of stake, though, because it's going to have the same problem, right?
Maybe. Yes.
I would prefer that, personally.
I would prefer that, too.
Because Bitcoin's the only remaining objective chain, if you like, that's anchored in something real.
Yes. And they can... and they can get philosophical there, but I think you and I agree that anchoring it in something real, in other words, having a cost in the real world, having to expend real resources to produce a block is a genius of Bitcoin in many ways. And proof of stake does away with that. Now, it doesn't mean proof of stake doesn't work. I'm not saying that. I love proof of stake.
Sure.
I think it is the future of smart contract platforms. I don't think they can run on proof of work very well. Look at Ethereum. They're too expensive. But what if you can figure out a way to have your cake and eat it too? What if you can have this robust, secure settlement layer and then build all these proof of stake systems on top? And then the layer twos, which are not even blockchains, because we refer to Arbitrum, for example, going back to that as a block. It's not really a blockchain. It kind of is, but it's not, because you don't need a validator set. There's a bunch of transactions that a bunch of nodes share. They're all shared with one another. There's one true path. This commits to Ethereum. No consensus is required. You can have 100 people looking at this Arbitrum chain. 99% could be lying. Only one of them could be telling the truth. And still, the one that's telling the truth will prevail. This is not a blockchain. You don't need 2/3 of validators to say, yes, this is what happened, and that's what the truth is. Because that's what can corrupt the system. If 2/3 of the Polygon validators had become corrupt, they can start lying, and it will be extremely difficult to call them out. On Arbitrum, if, again, 99% of validators begin lying, the 1% that's telling the truth will eventually prevail, and
So
it's because they have this challenge mechanism.
The person that gets the math right.
Yeah, the one that's verifying. Basically, when we say people are not telling the truth in a blockchain, we're saying there's a fork. There's two or more versions of what happened. And in a classic blockchain, when you have two or more versions, well, I shouldn't say in a classic blockchains. When this happens, all these decentralized networks, these blockchains, they all have a mechanism to find out what the truth is. They all do.
To get back into consensus.
Yeah, the longest chain rule and proof of work, for example. Well, whoever has the longest chain, that's the real one. In proof of stake, it usually comes down to, you can add, I think Cardano, for example, has done this. They added the concept of blockchain density. In other words, they do have the longer chain rule. They have they have analogs for what in proof of work is a pretty simple rule. But typically, the way it comes down to this. In proof of stake, whatever 2/3 of validators say is the truth.
Right.
So if 2/3 of validators collude, actually, if you corrupt 1/3, blockchain cannot, because you need 2/3 to confirm. So if you corrupt 1/3, the blockchain cannot come to consensus.
It's a stalemate, right?
It's a stalemate. You cannot tell what the truth is. Now, if 2/3 align and decide to start lying, no way to call them out. That is not how these optimistic roll-up solutions work. You need one person telling the truth, and that's it. That's all you need. So they're not really blockchains, and you do not need this new consensus layer on top of the consensus layer of the mainnet, right? There is no consensus layer. One person telling the truth, and there's a mechanism to find that out. And everybody can follow that one person. So it's quite interesting. And again, I don't think we emphasized this on our first iteration. We didn't make this point. It is a key point.
Polygon, you've got a new consensus layer sidechain on top of the Ethereum coming to consent. This is kind of like getting complex. Whereas you're saying with Arbitrum and Optimism, because they're not separate sidechains with their own blockchain and their own consensus, they use an Ethereum consensus, which is the same. So it's network effects, it's cleaner, it's less complex, easy to verify, all this kind of stuff. Preferable.
Yeah, I think technologically speaking, it's far more complex to have something like Optimism running than a sidechain.
Right.
But once you have it up and running, thinking about it in terms of security and trust is a lot easier. It's like, no, this uses the security of the mainnet. That's it. There's no other security. This can be stalled. You can have attacks on this layer 2. You can have conflicts where we don't know what happened, except anybody can verify it, and you can know what happened. So
it's a lot simpler to resolve.
The idea that all that's needed is one honest actor is super powerful, because one of the main weak points of any blockchain is you need a large set of people to be telling the truth, because the truth is defined by what this large number of people say.
That goes back
what
to
do they all want to lie?
That's relative truth rather than absolute truth.
Correct.
Right? Math is absolute truth, because there is a objective set of rules by which math obeys. And that's why we like proof of work, because it's physics. But anyway, let's not go there. But that's why we like that. But so we're singing the praises of these layer 2s right now. But like you say, there's always trade-offs. So why do we still love Polygon? Well, because
cheaper and faster.
Right. It's cheaper because of these negatives. It allows certain things to happen, like 2-second transactions that cost a fraction of a penny, right? And then that is like, from a user experience point of view, you're like, well, that's amazing.
The ecosystem is more mature at the time of this recording as well. So for me personally, it's all like I might consider switching somewhat to Arbitrum if the ecosystem matures. Just a 7-day wait period is a no-go for me. I'm going to wait for these people to start providing these services. Of course, you need to trust them, obviously, but someone's always going to be telling the truth in these layer 2s, in these optimistic roll-up solutions. Someone's going to be telling the truth.
Well, I've got a name for them. Accelerated bridges.
Right. Accelerated bridges. There you go. And actually, it's someone taking that risk off of your hands.
I'm going to say, if you use them, you don't have any risk. Because if the challenge period happens, they're the one that's going to lose.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because they're taking all the risk for you.
Exactly, which gives them an incentive to verify the chain and not you, and that's beautiful. That's why the model works, because
So
they're the ones verifying.
Sure.
You're the one who could cheat, not them.
Yep.
When they act as a bridge, you could cheat them. So if they're willing to release the funds to your mainnet, that's it. They did their work. And unless you're a shadowy super hacker,
Right, super
to use that term, shadowy super coder, unless you're one of those, you're not gonna lie to these people.
So you got to do due diligence.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So you have to verify the chain. That's the beauty of this model. There's an incentive for people to verify the chain and charge a fee for that service.
Well, that's free money if you do it properly, right?
If you do it properly, it's free money.
Right?
There's no risk. Exactly. And that's the beauty of it, because you have a guarantee that within 7 days, the true path will be chosen. That's how these things work. Not going to get into how, because it's math.
Sure.
But this is your guarantee. And that's very powerful in these layer 2s. Now, they're more expensive than Polygon. Polygon is fractions of a penny.
I was going to say, when you said that about you considering switching, like, dude, like Arbitrum's like orders of magnitude more expensive per transaction. It's still a lot cheaper than Ethereum, but wow, like it's nowhere near the fraction of a penny you get on Polygon.
It's nowhere near, but my understanding is there's some upgrades, there's some tweaking that can be done that would drive down costs, and there's also the fact that there's more activity. There's these fixed costs. I don't know how significant they are, but the fact remains, if there's more activity, these costs go down.
Right, because you're sharing the batch.
Yeah,
transaction cost in a batch.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what the statistics are for Arbitrum right now, but I do know that they settle on Ethereum I believe it's every 6 minutes. It's a short period of time, or whenever they fill out their batches. So if a batch is filled out, you can know that that's a cheap. If you think about it,
it's the
batch
most optimal shared amongst the most number.
So if it happens every minute or every 30 seconds, then okay, that's a pretty cheap batch that you have right there. But yeah, it's still expensive because there's a lot of data that needs to be pushed on mainnet, because again, these chains need to be verified. And so you have to provide all of the data required to verify them. Sure. So these are still kind of expensive compared to Polygon. Polygon is cheap, easy. It's easier to build stuff, I suppose, on Polygon, or maybe it's just a matter of time. I don't know. But the way it stands today, it is still better to use Polygon. You have bridges now between the two. So if you don't want to wait that 1 hour, then fine, just go to one of the many bridges to bridge your assets back to mainnet. You can go directly to exchanges. This is not a problem anymore for Polygon. The other thing is that it's grown to such a size that, okay, yeah, I do kind of trust these validators too. Maybe at first, when it was under $1 billion in market capitalization, that was a bit of a stretch. Yeah, it's a commit chain, but how do I know they're not lying? I think that ship has sailed now in terms of these people have already proven themselves. Polygon is now one of it's the scalability solution for it's the most used one. It's a blockchain in its own right. You could trust these people in their own right. Time. Yeah.
Like I remember when Matic Network launched, it was in that sort of category where, when lots of new stuff launches and there are all these little burgeoning grassroots, or what do you call them? Just these nascent projects that you're not quite sure which ones are gonna, because there's loads and loads of them. It was one of them, and I remember looking at Matic Token and going like, that's just this little startup thingy, and that was years and years and years and years ago, right? And they to their credit, they've worked and worked and worked and stuck at it and stuck at it and stuck at it until they broke through. And many projects don't persist as long as they have.
That's true. They stuck with it and they found, I think that their light bulb going off moment is when they decided to, instead of competing with Ethereum, let's commit to it. Mm-hmm. I think that's just a better model. I mean, it is the reason that a lot of people, myself included, decided to say, okay, I'll give this a shot. If I don't have to go to this entirely new separate universe, I can still be around Ethereum's orbit, and I trust Ethereum. So I'll move some of my funds there, and eventually started moving more and more and more. And now I use it a lot now.
Doesn't that bring us to the hash graph conversation we were having earlier on? Because we were talking about the hash graph superior consensus algorithm, and I said when I first learned about that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so technically superior. Blockchain technology, while it's just been invented, it hasn't even been mainstream adopted yet. It's already cooked, right? And your
Yeah, I
retort
felt
to
the
that,
same.
right, was that, well, it's similar to what you've just said about the adoption, right? Was that basically your point about it? It's not so much about the technology, but more about the compatibility. And this is the point you just made. If I can use something that's still in Ethereum's orbit, was the words you used. So you're not going too far away from what's familiar and you already trust. Whereas again, BSC, Binance Smart Chain, and then Hashgraph's right over here in its own universe, right? And it might be
Hmm.
a nice universe, right? But it's like it's come later to the party, and we're all kind of like in bed and really cozy with Ethereum, and it's perfectly fine. Right? It works. It works perfectly fine for most use cases.
Not only that, I think there's some practical implications to Ethereum being the largest and most secure of
There
all
we
the
go.
smart contract
The adoption
platforms.
thing.
Adoption, network effects, all the apps are on Ethereum, all the stuff that's interesting is on Ethereum. If you're a user, I consider myself a very active user. I would say I use it at least
Mm.
once a day, at least.
What's that? Which network you use?
Polygon or Ethereum, I use
At least once
both
a day.
a
Once a day,
lot.
right? Yeah, cool.
Yes. And I can tell you that I don't use Hashgraph because there's nothing to do.
There's nothing you want
Period.
to do on there.
There's just nothing to do. I mean, yeah, maybe applications are cheaper on Hashgraph, but where are the applications? There's nothing cool. There's nothing interesting going on.
Interesting.
One
That's very
one of the
interesting.
things I like most in terms of distributed applications is DYDX. I use it a lot. The layer 2 that uses ZK rollups. Beautiful thing. Now that one doesn't have any of the issues that the Optimism have. I mean, it has. Whenever they publish a batch, you know it's true. So that's the guarantee of ZK rollups. So that's a beautiful thing. That's on Ethereum. So if you want to use DYDX layer 2, if you want to trade on those markets, and I do, you're using Ethereum. So what's better for me as a DYDX user, for
As an end
example? Is it
user.
better to be on
Exactly.
Hashgraph? No, it's going to be on Ethereum. And what if Hashgraph forks DYDX layer 2? Because they could do this, they use the EVM. And they launch a similar version on their own mainnet. Well, here's the problem. You cannot fork a community.
I was going to say, it's
So
not enough, is it?
not enough. Right now you have, I think, I don't want to say billions, but at least $1 billion in volume on DYDX, on this distributed exchange that lives on Ethereum. Hashgraph can fork that all they want. They're not
No
going to get
network effects.
$10 million
Sure.
in volume.
No
So
liquidity.
no liquidity. I'm not going to use that thing. So you can fork the tech all you want. You can improve on the consensus algorithm all you want. If everybody's playing on this pool, that's where you want to be. You don't want to be somewhere else. You can have all the philosophical arguments you want about, well, actually, this one's better. I mean, look, technically speaking, it's so much more robust. Yeah, but guess what? No one is there.
All the yeses, except.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can't play because there's no one to play with, you're not going to use it. And that's a very sticky problem, right? Because you would need to migrate all users at once in order to make the switch. But individually, all of us collectively, we could just pick Hashgraph and make it the mainstream smart contract platform. But individually, we cannot. And so the way we'll look at it as individuals is, well, here's where everyone is. So this is where I'm going to be. Everybody else sees it the same way. And so they're going to be on this one network. And that's the problem that's the thing about network effects. You do not fork those. I don't think the Hashgraph people, when they launched, they couldn't quite understand this. They thought, and I remember this perfectly, they said, we're going to patent, which is big no-no. We're going to patent this consensus algorithm because of forks. Because if someone forks, how do you know what the real one is? It's pretty simple.
Okay.
Where the community is. That's the real network, where all the community is.
Well, that's the Bitcoin Cash debate settled.
And they forked again, and it didn't work. And Ethereum forked, and it didn't work. So you cannot fork the network effect. You can fork the code, not the network itself. That cannot be forked. So this is a non-issue.
The users, right?
It's the users. You cannot replicate those ad infinitum, right? So it's just an overstated problem, this fork risk.
That's very
totally overstated.
It's very interesting, mate. It's very interesting. I'm not saying anything disparaging about Swirls, which is the technology company that invented Hashgraph and patented it. Mance Harmon and his Oppo. But anyway, maybe, and this is my understanding of how, when I was deep into the computer science side of things, when you have a technological worldview and you think the tech is enough, you can forgive them, right? Totally forgive them for thinking that breakthrough innovation was enough. If you come from the Bill Gates school of thought, right? Like, oh, that's it, the technology. But if you come from the human, the emotional world, and look at the user end and how they make decisions, most people make decisions emotionally and justify them logically. That's the old tenant. Then that explains why Binance Smart Chain is so huge, despite it being, what it is. They've got community. They incentivize the Binance army, and everyone loves the Binance Smart Chain. Their users absolutely love it, right? And you can be like, oh, technology. They'll be like, yeah, don't care. We actually love it. We love all of the graphics and the cartoony pancakes. What they've cracked that community thing, which is where it's at.
Community is where it's at. And I do believe, this is another observation that I made, and I do believe that this is part of what's changed since 2020, I believe. We used to think more in terms of superior technology. I mean, the Bitcoin Cash debate was about fast transactions, and we have these huge blocks, and look at all the cool things we can do. We used to think that was a thing. But ever since we've realized, actually, network effects, community, that's the resource. That's the finite resource that everybody's competing for. And once you have that resource, very hard to lose it. So that our understanding of what gives value to a distributed network has changed over time, has matured over time. We now realize that you cannot fork a community. And what makes Ethereum or Bitcoin so powerful is not some technological aspect. Yes, the tech is interesting, and yes, the fact that Ethereum can do smart contracts is pretty cool. But at the end of the day, it's a gravitational pull of all these people involved in this one network. And so if you build on it, you're likely to succeed, or more likely to succeed than you're trying to compete with it. If you're trying to compete with it, you're starting from scratch, from nothing.
I'm going to build an electronics store on the moon where the population is 0.
Yeah. So right? I need to bring all these people now, because who am I going to sell to? Exactly. And so that creates its own sets of problems. And it's a problem that I think they're all having. I think since our understanding has changed, and that since we now know, and these networks and these teams know that network effects are important and community is important, they're all investing in trying to build their own communities. I mean, notably Cardano, I follow that project pretty closely. They spent a ton of resources trying to build community, to their credit. I mean, they understand that if they don't get community, their tech doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But I mean, the likes of Solana or Binance Smart Chain, they realize this too. They know you need community. Without those, I mean, you're toast. Tech alone is not going to cut it.
Well, all this is sort of in real time, awkwardly proving the subjective theory of value, right? Because it's only what the people value that ends up being valuable, right? So, and what I also wrote a note here about the consensus algorithms and hash graph and all that sort of stuff we just said. That's almost like that's the commodification. Technology becomes commodified, and you can't commodify people. That's correct. Because we are the ones, the human beings, that ultimately decide what value is. And that's the Austrian School of Economics, right? And that's why people can't get their head around why Bitcoin has value. Because the value is purely defined by the community. And people just can't get their head around that. Like, there is no objective value, right? It's all in the mind of a human.
That is true. And I even heard on a podcast recently, they were being asked about gold, and he said, very good point. He said, people like to say, even I've said before, it has intrinsic value. And then he made the point that no, there's no such thing as intrinsic value. Nothing has intrinsic value. Value is something we give to that we humans it's a property that we attribute to a thing. And that can be a digital, it can be a virtual thing. It doesn't have to be an actual thing that you can touch. We can attribute value to anything, to an idea. Ideas are pretty powerful. They're hard to kill. Sure. They have value, but they're abstract concepts. And the idea that we have created a value system or a monetary system that is completely abstract, well, we're actually just detaching the physical components from something that was always virtual to begin with. Money and value have always been virtual. It's always a concept.
virtual, I'm going to say subjective, as in it's of the people as well. So even when someone says like, oh, gold has intrinsic value, why? And they go, because it's shiny. Yeah, but that's still a value judgment from a human being. So when you say it's got intrinsic value, you're basically saying, I think it's got value, and you're a human being. So there we go. You can't escape it.
To their credit, the reason I think people say intrinsic value, because I've used this term too, what I mean by that specifically is that if I have gold in my hand, I have value, right? It doesn't depend on something else. If I have a bond, for example, it has value only if this company, meets its obligations. If you have stock, it only has value if this company is doing well. If I have money at the bank, it only has value if the bank is solvent.
Well, that's not quite true, though, because you're talking about the middleman. The stock only you said the stock only has value if they perform well. That's not true.
Right.
The stock only has value if someone else will buy it off you and sees it as valuable. Why would they see it as valuable? Well, if the company's performing well, right? But at the end of it, there's two human beings on either end of that transaction defining the value.
Okay,
that's true. Mate. That is an objective truth. You can't escape it. You cannot escape it. If there were no human beings, conscious human beings on the planet, there would be no such thing as an economy or value.
That is true.
The animals would just carry on walking around doing their thing, eating leaves and each other and whatever, right?
That, I guess I stand corrected, sir. I guess I stand corrected. If you have a gold coin, it only has value because people say it does.
You said you've got value in your hand. You haven't. You've got a gold bar in your hand. The value is when I want to buy it off you, right? Because I value it, and that's subjective because I'm a human being. So you can't escape it. No escape. No escape.
Totally true. And I think the other point this person made, which was pretty interesting, is, hey, if you're a deserted island, that gold bar is pretty useless. You're not going to do anything with it.
That is exactly.
If you're on a deserted island and this guy has all the coconuts in that deserted island, guess what? Those coconuts are worth far more than your gold. In fact, your gold is totally worthless because you can't do anything with it.
Exactly. In a world with no internet, blockchain, Bitcoin, useless.
Totally useless.
Valueless as well. So
valueless. Yeah, it doesn't even exist, actually. I mean, you can have, I suppose, a paper record of the Bitcoin blockchain. You can print it out, I suppose. But
a lot of paper,
a lot of paper, and it's totally useless. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, all value is subjective.
It is.
You're right.
Cool. I think we've done this one. So we'll close it there, mate. With that. We good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, Juan. Thanks for being on the Cryptoverse. What am I talking about? Thanks for being on the Sunday Special once again.
Thanks for having me, sir.
All right, mate. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Weiss Crypto Sunday Special with me, Chris Coney. Saying until the next one, it's bye for now.